Have you ever tried to buy your first home? You found the perfect house, the right price, a good neighborhood. You made an offer. Then the realtor called back, "Sorry, you lost to a cash offer." Who pays cash for a house? The answer, Invitation Homes. A company owned by Blackstone. They own over 80,000 homes, all in America's suburbs. Every month, they're buying more with cash offers. But Blackstone isn't selling these homes. They're renting them to you at the price you could have bought them for. The average American can no longer afford homeownership because Wall Street private equity firms are buying up entire neighborhoods with unlimited cash. And this is just the beginning. Wait until you see what they've done to your hospital, your dentist, your veterinarian, and your daycare. Private equity. Most people hear this term and have no idea what it means. But they live with the consequences every single day. Their hospitals are closing. Their rents are doubling, tripling. Their favorite brands are going bankrupt. Their retirement funds are evaporating. Behind all of it, the same player, private equity firms. These companies have quietly infiltrated every corner of the economy, and now they're systematically destroying it. So what exactly is private equity? In simple terms, firms that collect money from wealthy investors. They use this money to buy companies. But here's the trick. They use very little of their own money. They borrow massive amounts of debt using the assets of the company they're buying as collateral. This is called a leveraged buyout. Then they load that debt onto the company they just bought. The company is now responsible for paying back that debt. The private equity firm? They just watch and extract profits. In 1980, the private equity sector managed a total of $5 billion. In 2024, that number surpassed $12 trillion, a 2,400x increase in 44 years. Right now, there are 19,000 private equity firms operating in America, more than McDonald's restaurants. These firms own over 30,000 companies. They employ 12 million Americans. Or more accurately, the fate of 12 million Americans is tied to these firms' profit calculations. Let's look at healthcare. In 2018, Steward Health Care was one of America's largest private hospital chains. 30 hospitals, 30,000 employees. It primarily served rural areas and poor neighborhoods. For millions of patients, it was the only accessible healthcare center. In 2010, a private equity firm called Cerberus Capital Management bought Steward for $1.25 billion. But they only put down $250 million of their own money. The rest? Debt. $1 billion in debt. They borrowed this using Steward's assets as collateral. Then they loaded that debt onto Steward's balance sheet. Cerberus started extracting profits from day one. How? They sold the hospital buildings. Yes, you heard that right. They sold the buildings the hospitals owned to a real estate company called Medical Properties Trust for $1.2 billion. Then they leased those same buildings back. This tactic is called sale-leaseback. On paper, it looks like a brilliant transaction. The company gets $1.2 billion in cash. But what actually happens? Steward now has to pay rent on its own buildings every month, forever. And that rent is much higher than the maintenance costs they paid when they owned the buildings. Cerberus took that $1.2 billion. They paid themselves an $800 million special dividend. In other words, they pocketed the profit and left. Steward was left behind, drowning in debt, having lost its buildings, obligated to pay high rent. In 2020, COVID hit. The hospitals were already struggling. Steward had no cash reserves, because that cash was in Cerberus's pocket. Nurses couldn't be paid. Medical equipment couldn't be purchased. In 2024, the system collapsed. Steward filed for bankruptcy. 30 hospitals closed. 30,000 employees were laid off. Millions of patients had to travel 50, 100, sometimes 150 miles to the nearest hospital. Did Cerberus Capital Management lose anything? No. They walked away with $800 million in profit, even in 2024, the year of the bankruptcy. Steward's CEO, Ralph de la Torre, he earned $5.3 million in salary in 2023, plus bonuses, plus the right to use 2 private jets, plus a $40 million yacht. While hospitals were collapsing, while nurses weren't getting paid, while patients couldn't find emergency rooms. This isn't just one story, it's repeating all across America. Since 2010, over 130 rural hospitals have closed. Most were bought by private equity firms, stripped and abandoned. Apollo Global Management owns HCA Healthcare. KKR owns Envision Healthcare, the largest company employing emergency room physicians. What happened after KKR bought it? Physician numbers were reduced, salaries were cut, time per patient was shortened, quality dropped, but KKR's profits increased because costs had fallen. Now let's look at the housing market. During the 2008 financial crisis, millions of Americans lost their homes. Foreclosure, banks sold these homes. Who bought them? Average families? No, private equity firms. Blackstone, the world's largest asset management company, founded a company called Invitation Homes in 2012. The goal: buy single-family homes in bulk. Between 2012 and 2015, Blackstone spent $10 billion. They bought over 50,000 homes. Cash, at competitive prices, outbidding individual buyers. Invitation Homes now owns over 80,000 homes, all in America's suburbs: Phoenix, Las Vegas, Atlanta, Tampa, cities targeted by first-time homebuyers. The strategy is simple: buy with cash, renovate, rent, continuously raise prices. Blackstone isn't alone. American Homes 4, Rent, Progress Residential, Tricon Residential. They're all playing the same game. According to 2023 data, institutional investors own over 600,000 single-family homes in America. This number was nearly zero in 2010. 600,000 homes in 13 years. And they're buying more every year. The result? First-time homebuyers are being squeezed out of the market. Home ownership rates are falling. The American dream has become Wall Street's profit statement. Let's turn to the Toys R Us story, because this is the perfect example of the private equity model. In 2005, 3 private equity firms, KKR, Bain Capital, and Vornado, bought Toys R Us for $6.6 billion. They put down only $1.3 billion of their own money. The remaining $5.3 billion, debt. They borrowed that debt using Toys R Us's assets as collateral. Then they loaded that $5.3 billion onto Toys R Us's balance sheet. Now Toys R Us had to pay $400 million in interest every year. Just interest, not principal? Before 2005, Toys R Us was a profitable company. It had problems, yes. It was struggling with online competition. But it could have survived. But with $5.3 billion in debt, impossible. Paying $400 million in interest every year meant they couldn't invest in new stores, technology, or employee training. Amazon was investing. Toys R Us was paying debt. By 2017, the inevitable happened. The company filed for bankruptcy. In 2018, all stores closed. 33,000 employees were laid off. Retirement funds evaporated. Did KKR, Bain, and Vornado lose anything? No. Between 2005 and 2017, they collected a total of $470 million in consulting fees and management fees. From Toys R Us, from the company they destroyed. While workers lost their pensions, executives got their bonuses. Private equity firms stuffed their pockets. Why is this legal? Because of regulatory loopholes. Private equity firms sell consulting and management services. On paper. In reality, they're just extracting money. But it's legal, because the laws were written in the 1980s. Back then, the private equity sector was $5 billion. Nobody saw it as a threat. Now it's $12 trillion. But the laws haven't changed. Lobbyists made sure of that. Private equity firms also exploit a tax advantage, a system called carried interest. Private equity managers report their profits as capital gains, so they pay 20% tax. If it were reported as income, they'd pay 37%. Thanks to this loophole, billionaire private equity managers pay lower tax rates than nurses. Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders have been trying to close this loophole for years. They've failed. Because the private equity lobby is too powerful. In 2023 alone, they spent over $100 million on lobbying. Now let's look to the future. Private equity firms have selected their next target. Veterinary clinics. Jab Holding, a private equity giant that owns brands like Luxottica, Pret-a-Manger, and Krispy Kreme, entered the veterinary sector in 2019. They bought National Veterinary Associates for $1.1 billion, then Compassion First Pet Hospitals, then several more. Today, they own over 800 veterinary clinics, 15% of all veterinary clinics in America. The strategy is the same: buy, consolidate, raise prices. An average dog surgery cost $800 in 2019. In 2024, it's $2,400, a 200% increase in 5 years. Why? Because competition has decreased. Jabe Holding and similar firms have consolidated the market. The local vet closed. The franchise chain remained. They control prices. Pet owners can't find alternatives. Either pay up or lose your animal. Dental clinics are also on the list. Aspen Dental owns over 900 clinics. Heartland Dental, 1,800 clinics, both under private equity control. Daycares? Bright Horizons owns over 1,000 daycares. Bain Capital bought it. Kinda Care, 2,000 locations. Controlled by Partners Group. Even tattoo parlors. Yes, tattoo parlors. Raw Capital owns chains like Hand and Stone and Club Tattoo. The pattern is always the same. Find a fragmented sector, buy local businesses, consolidate, raise prices, cut quality, maximize profit. Consumers can't find alternatives. Workers can't negotiate salaries. Small business owners can't compete. The system works in favor of private equity. The pattern is always the same. Find a fragmented sector, buy local businesses, consolidate, raise prices, cut quality, maximize profit. Consumers can't find alternatives. Workers can't negotiate salaries. Small business owners can't compete. The system works in favor of private equity. As of 2024, private equity firms are dominant in the following sectors: healthcare, 30%, real estate, 20%, retail, 15%, technology, 12%, energy, 10%. The remaining 13% is scattered across sectors like restaurants, education, entertainment, and transportation. In every sector, the same story: buy, load with debt, extract profit, leave destruction behind. Apollo Global Management's founder, Leon Black, said at a 2019 conference, "Private equity is the most sophisticated form of financial engineering." Financial engineering. A nice term. What it really means: accounting tricks make the rich richer. Workers lose their wages. Consumers pay more. The system collapses. But on paper, everything is legal. So what can be done? Regulations. Close the carried interest loophole. Limit sale-leaseback transactions. Cap debt loading. Protect worker rights in acquired companies. But none of this is easy, because the private equity lobby is powerful. They donate millions to politicians, to both Democrats and Republicans. It's a bipartisan problem. Steven Schwartzman, Blackstone's CEO, donated $30 million in the 2020 election. Just one person. $30 million. How do you fight against that money? Some states have taken action. California is investigating private equity hospital acquisitions. Massachusetts is discussing debt loading limits. But there's no movement at the federal level because hundreds of congressmen own private equity firms or have invested in private equity funds. The conflict of interest is obvious, but nobody cares. The end of the story is this: private equity is capitalism's most ruthless version. It's not a free market because it destroys competition. It's not innovation because it pursues short-term profit instead of long-term investment. It doesn't create value. It steals value. It takes existing assets, strips them, and leaves wreckage behind. As of 2024, private equity firms are dominant in the following sectors: healthcare, the 30%, real estate, 20%, retail, 15%, technology, 12%, energy, 10%. The remaining 13% is scattered across sectors like restaurants, education, entertainment, and transportation. In every sector, the same story: buy, load with debt, extract profit, leave destruction behind. Apollo Global Management's founder, Leon Black, said at a 2019 conference, "Private equity is the most sophisticated form of financial engineering." Financial engineering. A nice term. What it really means: accounting tricks make the rich richer. Workers lose their wages. Consumers pay more. The system collapses. But on paper, everything is legal. So what can be done? Regulations. Close the carried interest loophole. Limit sale-leaseback transactions. Cap debt loading. Protect worker rights in acquired companies. But none of this is easy. Because the private equity lobby is powerful. They donate millions to politicians. To both Democrats and Republicans, it's a bipartisan problem. Steven Schwartzman, Blackstone CEO, donated $30 million in the 2020 election. Just one person, $30 million. How do you fight against that money? Some states have taken action. California is investigating private equity hospital acquisitions. Massachusetts is discussing debt loading limits, but there's no movement at the federal level. Because hundreds of congressmen own private equity firms or have invested in private equity funds, the conflict of interest is obvious, but nobody cares. The end of the story is this. Private equity is capitalism's most ruthless version. It's not a free market. Because it destroys competition, it's not innovation. Because it pursues short-term profit instead of long-term investment, it doesn't create value, it steals value. It takes existing assets, strips them, and leaves wreckage behind. The end of the story is this. Private equity is capitalism's most ruthless version. It's not a free market. Because it destroys competition, it's not innovation. Because it pursues short-term profit instead of long-term investment, it doesn't create value. It steals value. It takes existing assets, strips them, and leaves wreckage behind. The next time you try to buy a home and get the answer, you lost to a cash offer. Know that you're up against unlimited capital. When you go to your hospital and find it closed, know that private equity extracted its profit. When your veterinarian triples the bill, know that Jab Holding has targeted you. When your daycare doubles its monthly fee, know that you've been added to Bain Capital's portfolio. Private equity has infiltrated every corner of the economy, and the system works in their favor. Laws protect them. Politicians take their money, media ignores them, and you're struggling to pay your bills wondering why it's so hard. That's why private equity, silent destruction, legal robbery, and nobody can stop it.